This is the Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known.
Hello, everybody. I am just sharing my screen and needing to focus on one thing. There we go. So welcome to the book club. It is Wednesday, 17th. Summer is ticking by so quickly. I have less than 3 weeks before my oldest goes back to college, and I'm not looking forward to that. So yeah, my summer is definitely going by too quickly. Thank you for those of you who extended such grace last week with my internet challenges, and I missed meeting with you all. So we're going to finish up our conversation about the Quadrivium today, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. So first, I just thought I would share a little bit of encouragement with you. I tried to learn to knit several times. My mom knew how to knit. We came from England, and so it seems like everybody there knows how to knit. So she grew up, she knew how to knit all kinds of things for us. And she tried to teach me several times, and I just could never get the hang of it. It was just painful. It just never clicked. I could never do it. And somewhere in the 15 or so years ago, I wanted to have something to do. And so I taught myself how to crochet. And I was actually really inspired to learn how to crochet at practicum. I can still remember Heather Shirley speaking and just being really encouraged while I was sitting there. And all the ladies from my community were sitting next to me with their crochet going the whole time, and I had nothing. So I decided I was going to learn to crochet, and I did. It clicked, and it was fun. Fast forward to this past weekend, and I happened to visit a yarn store where they had this really beautiful yarn. And I was like, oh, I want to make something out of this yarn. And the lady was helping me find a pattern. And she said, okay, well, it's going to need 1,300 yards. And of course, each skein has about 400 yards. And so I needed 4 skeins of this cotton that I'd found and loved. And it was going to cost me well over $100 for this yarn. And I was like, oh, I can't afford that. And so crochet takes about 3 times as much yarn as knitting does. And she said, you know, you could make the same thing for just 1 skein of if you were knitting. So I said, well, maybe I need to teach myself. And her response was, well, you should, because it's so much more versatile. So why don't you come back tomorrow and we'll teach you? Not to be patient or anything, but I went ahead, I got the yarn, had some yarn that I'd taken with me on our trip anyway. I got some needles, and I jumped on YouTube and I said, well, I'm going to see if I can figure this out. And I don't know what had happened, if it had just been that my brain needed a couple of decades to marinate, but all of a sudden I could knit. And so what you see there is a picture of my knitting, like something that I have actually been working on for the past several days. It's nothing elaborate. It is just a knit stitch. But this is really an encouragement to me and a reminder that sometimes we hit roadblocks in our lives. And for some of you, that may have been a math roadblock. And for a lot of people, it's a math roadblock, right? We get to a class where the ideas are challenging and they don't flow as easily, and it's hard. And we're not forced to continue on. And so we stop. And we just put that in the category of things that we maybe can't do. And then time goes by and our brain is still working in the background. And even though we've told ourselves, I can't do that, something jogs us to try again. And all of a sudden go, oh, I can do this. So for me, this weekend was discovering that I can, in fact, knit. And I just wanted to share that in case that would encourage anybody who's on to something they think they cannot do. as an encouragement that perhaps with a little bit of time and persistence, it will become available and accessible to you.
That's a great reminder for sure.
So we are looking at 4D and NB today. We jump into talking about the Quadrivium. Has anybody brought questions? And I just want to remind you that you can ask questions from any of the lessons or just questions in general about the math map. They don't have to be related to what we're talking about. And we can actually skip what we're talking about in order to answer your questions. So does anybody have questions they'd like to have answered at the beginning of the day? And I don't know really, I need to research like how long that awkward silence is supposed to be in order to encourage people to answer, because I'm not sure. But we'll have another opportunity. So if you were about to speak, I will have another opportunity at the end. So please make sure you do ask your questions. So this week we're talking about harmonics. And when we think of harmonics, we're thinking about numbers in time. And historically, harmonics are thought of as the mathematics of music. And so it can include things like rhythm and beat, frequency and pitch, amplitude and volume. It can also be the place where we think about balance and harmony, how things are balanced, how things work together of creation. So for the ancients, looking at harmonics, that philosophical idea was that there were patterns in music, and the ancients really believed that those patterns in music could also describe the patterns of the universe. And that's what we know of as the music of the spheres. When they talk about the spheres, they were talking about the heavenlies, the planets, the stars, and the patterns that existed in their motion, right, from what they could see. And they believed that that was intricately connected to music. And so for them, music was the gateway to harmony within and with the universe. Now, practically, when we think of harmonics in the ancient times as well as now, we think of communication, right? How do we get sound, right, from one person to another, whether that was through music or perhaps over distances? Are there ways that we can noises over distances? So there's always that practical application to the math that we're looking at, the quadrivium. But in the ancients, there was a lot of that philosophical look at harmonics. Today, when we think of modern harmonics, a lot of times people just think of the theoretical and pure music. Right? So music theory, how do you analyze and interpret music? Or applying that, right? How do you create music? We could think that they are also looking at the math of perhaps CDs and streaming and record players, right? How do these different mediums store music, and then how do we get that out of that storage? When we think Christian harmonics, again, we always try to look at what's the theoretical and the applied. And so the theoretical aspect of harmonics is that when we look at it, we're looking to understand God's word, perhaps being able to communicate beyond words, right? And then ultimately to see the unseen. And so that's why do we study harmonics, right? Those are our theoretical reasons. But as we look at the applied reasons, right, how do we apply these ideas of harmonics? If we look at Psalm 96:1, it says to sing to the Lord a new song, sing to the Lord all the earth. So part of praising God is done through song and music. And so that idea of harmony, right, us being in harmony with God, can stem from, right, how we approach him. And we're told to sing to him with song. Then in Ephesians 9, 5:19, we're told to speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, to sing and make music from your heart to the Lord. And so there, this idea of a musically inspired speech is not just in praise to God, but in how we treat one another. And back to what we said the ancients were looking for, right? That this harmony with the universe through music. That when we look at this verse from Ephesians and we're told that they're songs from the Spirit, right? Those of us who are Christians, right, and now have unity with the Spirit, right? There's that sense of harmony. That when we're in harmony with the Spirit, we're getting songs from Him that inspire how we interact with one another. So we include this harmonics in 4D because in 4D we're looking at how things may change in time. So we're looking at rates and changing in time. So that idea of numbers in time. But how does harmonics help us to see beyond our 3D existence? So the things that we've just said about what harmonics are help us see beyond our 3D existence. Now, how about this? How many of you have ever been in a place, right, physically in a place, but you close your eyes and you listen? Whether it's to music or perhaps to a waterfall or the ocean or the birds, and you just stop and you listen. Are you somehow more aware of your surroundings?
I think so, because you're making a point to seek that out. Whereas normally we're doing 15 other things. So I think closing your eyes helps you focus on something else that you can hear instead of what you just see or what you're doing.
I would take that even a step further and say that in those moments where we have the time and the space and the capacity to pause and really listen, you spoke about like the being at the beach or a waterfall. And I think like, I just took a second, like picture myself, like, what would that be like? What would it sound like? And really it draws emotion when we're, so many times, I don't know, I guess I grew up by the beach. So for me, like, to go to the beach, it's like nostalgic and it's emotional to, so if we pause and we take in the sounds around us, it can also draw in emotion and memory and feeling.
I love that. That's certainly seeing beyond our 3D moment, isn't it?
You think it's hard to close your eyes? Like when I'm at the beach, I don't think about closing my eyes, like to listen. Like when I'm at home, there are times when I think, well, like I've been having some eye issues. So I have these eye things that you put on and they like massage your eyeballs and they like have heat. And it's really weird because I can't see, right? And so I have to hear. And so I feel like it's just hard to, like Rachel saying, hard to remember to close your eyes. Now, in that way, I'm forced to close my eyes, but I feel like it's hard to just do it, like to think, okay, I should probably close my eyes to have a different experience.
And yet when we close our eyes, it does heighten our sound, our ability to hear. And then I think that is what invokes us to realize that there's something bigger than just what we're looking at. like Jennifer referred to, nostalgia, the emotion that is when she thinks of something like the water running in the ocean. So then we realize we're bigger. I mean, we're smaller. There's more out there, another dimension. When we are incorporating our senses, we are able to experience or realize that there is something else besides our 3D existence.
So how many of you, like, when you're singing at church, right? If you're in a church where you sing, and you're overcome, right? Sometimes I know I am, like, I'll be singing something and it might be a hymn I've sung before, and suddenly I hear it a new way, right? And I'm overwhelmed by the sense of the Spirit inhabiting that hymn. Would hymns of praise or songs of praise, whatever your musical is at church, if you have that, would the words be as impactful if we weren't singing them, if we just read them out loud?
I think it depends on the person. I love music, so I feel like, you know, the music does something. It invokes a different kind of experience. But I think it does depend on the person. I think some people can read something or hear something spoken, but I'm kind of like you. Like, I do feel like the music, and that's why sometimes I'll get teary on a song. Now, it might not be a Christian song, but sometimes the words are not even that good, but the music is so beautiful that it kind of, invokes a different kind of experience.
I think too, like reading versus saying something aloud or hashing it out with, your friends is like kind of next level from reading. And so music is almost like next level from speaking.
I like that. Which is easier, to speak in harmony or to sing in harmony?
That's what I was just thinking about, actually. Is, I mean, it's a lot easier to sing in harmony and have it sound beautiful, and than it is for people to necessarily speak. We can all maybe speak at the same time, but it doesn't necessarily sound the same.
Yeah, I feel like in like a responsive reading at church, there's always that, like, nobody's ever perfectly in sync. Yeah. So that certainly is transporting us somehow, isn't it? That harmony is somehow adding another to what we're doing, right? Which makes me think, when you look at the Psalms and it says, it's meant to be sung, that I think, what are we? And I know that there are groups who have put the Psalms to music, but it would be really neat. And I wonder if in heaven one day we'll get to experience what the intent, the musical accompaniment or intent of the Psalms would be, and will it impact us differently to how we experience them when we read them or even speak them aloud? So some of the things that we're talking about take us into that realm of ND, our imagination space, in the math map. And when we talk about our imagination, we've said this before, that imagination is not make-believe. That making believe is, right, pretending something is real even though it isn't. Making believe is seeing a waterfall and a beautiful glade and pretending that the fairies might live under a certain rock, right? That's make believe. We know that fairies don't exist, but we can tell a story and pretend for a time that perhaps they are. Imagination, on the other hand, being able to see things in our mind, even if we cannot experience them with our senses. So that's the idea of That's really the idea of seeing the unseen, and it requires our imagination. And that's where we're going to achieve, right? We have to use our imagination. We have to see the unseen to achieve the goal of the liberal arts, which when we go back and we talk about what was the goal of the liberal arts, well, it was to discover unity or wholeness, or as Christians, we know we're looking to discover God, right? And we use words like truth, beauty, and goodness to help explain what we're after. But the ultimate goal of the liberal arts was to discover the unity or wholeness of the universe, which we can only find in God. And we've seen that we talked about the trivium, that the emphasis there is words and language. And it's that words and language that mean we can really learn anything, right? If I can decode, right? So like with my knitting, there's vocabulary that goes alongside of that. I have to know what knit and purl means, and cast on and cast off. And I didn't know there were half a dozen different ways to increase and half a dozen different ways to decrease. And so there's vocabulary that I need to learn, and not just what the words mean, right? But the symbols that go along with that. And then once I start doing that, right, and I have my words, I can start putting those words together and sort of to build my understanding. So that's where we say that the trivia, the skills of learning anything, because when we learn the language, right, it's more than just translating word for word, but it's being able to put things together and understand and then communicate. And so those arts of the grammar, the dialectic, and the rhetoric give us this command of language, but it also gives us the skills that we're going to then take to learn anything. It's setting us up to then use those skills in order to look at the quadrivium. And we've seen that the core of the quadrivium is numbers and ultimately mathematics. And so that's where we're headed, right, is making sure that CC students and those who use the math map are learning the language of mathematics in order to be prepared to take a deeper look at these ideas of the quadrivium. Have any thoughts, anything you'd like to add about when it comes to the quadrivium? I hope this has been helpful, kind of taking a look at the quadrivium and this look at where we headed with our students in the math map. Quick quiz. Are any of our students in the quadrivium yet?
No.
No. So we can take some pressure off of ourselves to think to teach these ideas of the quadrivium to our students and have them master them now. That we are emphasizing the language of mathematics. They're going to get some, right, elements of the quadrivium. They're going to start studying the grammar of the quadrivium, but really diving deep into it and mastering it is going to be something that follows on after this. And so I like to take a minute to really emphasize that, because I think that we as homeschool parents are pretty confident in being able to teach our students the trivium, that after a year or two of working through the classical method, we start to recognize just how naturally, or naturally it not actually models, but puts definition to how we learn. Just to pointing out the grammar of things to our students and helping them to decode the language and build that understanding. And as I think we have confidence there. We as parents can be really confident that we can do that for mathematics as well, even if we don't necessarily yet ourselves fully understand all of the topics of mathematics, because that understanding will come with time, just like my knitting came with time. Hopefully not 2 decades worth of a break, will come with time.
So Kirsty, tell me if I'm way off on this, okay? But when you were talking about that, it made me think of the mom who has a 5-year-old who looks at the charts and they are like, why would they include this stuff in a 5-year-old curriculum? And it's really to see the end goal, right?
Yeah.
And so to see what's coming, what's ahead. And so when you were talking about this, like we might not see this right now, we just know that this is the end goal. And so I was kind of trying to relate it to that, is that as a parent who's actually physically using the curriculum, it's kind of like being the parent of a 5-year-old who doesn't understand why they're including all this information about the charts, right? But it's so that we can introduce them to some of that grammar and know that that's the end goal.
Yeah, I think that is a really analogy, that seeing where we're headed helps us along the way, right? Just like if you are a knitter or a sewer or anybody who creates things, there's a different level between somebody like me who has a pattern, right? And so I have a pattern that there we go. I have a pattern, and the pattern includes a picture, so that I know what is it that I'm trying to create. I can look at this picture and go, yeah, what I'm creating looks like I'm on the right track. And that's one level of creativity, which is great. And I think that's where a lot of us are. And so the charts are like that. They're having a picture, right, of a pattern, the picture on the puzzle box. Babs and I were talking about puzzles earlier, and it's a lot easier to put together a puzzle. The picture is on the box. Then there's like the next level people, creative people. People like my son, who can sit there and see a piece of wood and then just start carving it. And 5 minutes later, he's got a rough outline of a reindeer. And I'm like, how did you do that? Right. And then for details, he might go and look at a picture to make sure but he can just sit there and create, or take Lego and be like, well, I'm going to build this. And the next thing you know, he's got a model of the statue built out of Duplo blocks. And you're like, and again, how did you do that? Right? How can you just sit there and take these pieces and put them together? And so I think those are like the artists among us who can, right, see in their mind and then create. But most of us need a picture of where we're headed. And that's a great analogy, Babs, that the charts are that picture. Like the quadrivium gives us a picture of where we are heading in the big picture, and the charts are giving us a picture of where we're specifically headed with the math map. Some people are out there that can just, right, who have seen math truth without a picture. And those are the people that we are building upon, right? Their work is the work we're building upon. And there's so many, I've read now that it's attributed to different people, right? But I think the first time I saw it, it was Newton who said, right, if I have seen farther, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. And so it's those giants, is clearly one, who could see things without having a picture of where they were headed. I like having a picture. Well, just to remind you of where we are. So we are in the 2024-2025 academic year. So this is when they are being released. Digits, naturals, and fractions are all available digitally through the companion on CC Connected. Complex is available in print. Next year, all of the levels through monomials will be available either in print or digitally. So I'd just like to remind everybody about that. And pretty soon the academic year is going to be started, and everybody will have paid their tuition, and everybody will have access to the companion. Hard to believe it's coming up so quickly. And then just to remind you of the things that we have here to help you, you've got the companion, the CC Connected forums, your own community and tutors, certainly emailing, and then the Math Map Book Club that you're here. Feel free to invite everybody. Next week, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we are going to be practicing some table talks for practicum next year. Lee has some great things that she's got planned, so we're looking forward to that. And then the following week, July 31st, we will start going one lesson per week again. We will start with lesson 1, Ex Nihilo, and we're going to use that in-community outline as our guide for exploring the Math Map lessons. They don't know this yet, but I lead the first couple of those, but then we may have some of our master pilot tutors take a week just to give you some different ideas about how different tutors might lead us through that. So I'm sure that they will be excited about that.
Kirsty, would you mind repeating on July 31st what the switch is going to be? You're going to be using what?
Sure. So on July 31st, we're going to start, instead of going by dimension, which is what we've done this last few weeks, we're going to go by lesson. So July 31st will be lesson 1, and then August 7th will be lesson 2, and so forth. And what we're going to do is use the in-community outline. So for those of you who are not in Challenge A, you won't be familiar with that. Challenge A directors will certainly be familiar with it. Parents may be less familiar, but Lee has put together an outline for going through the curriculum each week. And so what we're going to do is we're going to follow her outline as though we were in a challenge seminar and go through each lesson so that those of you who are curious, what does this look like in community, are going to have the opportunity to see that and participate as though you were students in that. So that's what we're going to start. And so we will go, I forget exactly how far I have us scheduled out. I think we're going to go through lesson 17 before Christmas. Then we'll have a couple of where we're going to have sort of unstructured time, but just sort of be here to jump on and answer questions. And then after Christmas, after New Year's, we'll pick up with lesson 18 and carry on through lesson 30.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're going to be the students and you're going to be leading us.
The first couple of weeks, yes.
So it seems like that's something that will be really beneficial for the tutors, but really also for the parents to see, and also as a model for what they could do at home, right?
That's our goal. We've had a lot of people who have said, is there a video or something that shows what this looks like in practice? And one of the things that we want to avoid is making people think that there's a right way. So that the in-community outline is just that, it's an outline. And there is more there than you can do. You can't do everything in an hour. And so it is customizable and tailorable to each community as needed, or for parents to use at home as they need. And so what we decided was, instead of putting out just one example and saying, this is just an example, don't do it like this, that it would be more helpful to go through week by week. So you can see every week might be a little bit different, right? Depending on how the students interact, what the topic is. And so that we'll have 30 examples to show how every community, every class could be a little bit different.
That sounds really great. I'm excited about that.
Me too. So here's my question slide in case we need to write anything. So are there any questions that you have about anything? Well, I'm just going to say thank you all for being here. I enjoyed our conversation about, seeing beyond with music. And hopefully we'll all be a little bit more attuned, right, to listening as well as seeing. And then what do those sounds, what memories do they evoke, or maybe how do they help us to find unity with the spirit, right? What is it that does for us? And that hopefully this opportunity to go through the Quadrivium together has been helpful in understanding where we're progressing. I read as I was studying for or researching for this to help myself understand the Quadrivium more. I found a really interesting essay that was contrasting sort of a Quadrivium approach to mathematics to a traditional approach to mathematics, which tends to be more, what job can I get? How does this help me get a college degree? Am I going to make more money? Right? That those are the things that motivate sort of our traditional math education. But when we have this Quadrivium focus, that one, it unifies it, right? Because it's giving it a different unity because it's searching for unity. And so it gives us a different purpose in why we're pursuing that deeper math understanding. And if any of you are interested in pursuing the Quadrivium more, I just thought I'd give a quick plug for the CC Masters program. We are getting ready to launch the math, which is a Quadrivium focused math program. And so we're going to be looking at topics that hit each of those Quadrivium, those pieces of the Quadrivium over the course of the courses, the 6 courses that are in that concentration. So if any of you are like, oh, I really want to know more, I just thought I would put that plug out there that the CC Masters is a great opportunity to go and explore that. Well, if you don't have any more questions, thank you all for being here. I think it's probably good in these dog days of summer to maybe have a little bit shorter book club. But I look forward to seeing you next week, and certainly on the 31st when we jump back into what's going to feel more academic year as we go lesson by lesson. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty.